Welcome back, everyone, to the Shock Absorber podcast, and it is exciting to welcome two people to the lounge today. Tim, you've been on here a few times.
Just a few?
Yep.
Regular.
You're a regular.
Do you take Metamucil?
It always leaves it open for that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Your regularity. Let's maybe we won't discuss your regularity.
My regularity is really good.
Welcome back, Stu.
I eat a lot of salad.
Do you? Isn't it fibre?
Fibre.
I don't know,
You got to
but
eat
it's
fibre.
nice.
You need your seeds.
Seeds?
Lots of seeds.
Oh, yeah.
It's just an excuse
chia
to
seeds.
eat. For me, it's just an excuse to eat olive oil and lemon and salt, which are my three favourite things in the world.
There's nothing wrong with those things. They're nice. Very good. Anyway, welcome back, Stu.
It's good to be back.
It's nice to have you back. No longer are your fingers a little bit like calloused from all the typing of the PhD?
I have calluses on my fingertips. A little bit of RSI, a little bit of mouse tennis elbow.
From moving the mouse?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't have any of those symptoms.
Welcome back. It's really good to have you back. You've been writing a PhD,
Yes.
as we said. What's the word count update?
Well, it was over 40,000, but then I edited some stuff out and it's back to 38 again.
That's all right. Only 2,000.
So it was nearly 50, and then I got rid of 10,000 words.
Oh, really?
So that's part of the process. You write and you edit, and you write and you edit.
Yeah.
So
We've been talking on and
I'm
off
into
about,
chapter 3. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, okay. Because we've been talking on and off about the process of even writing books and things like that. Do you enjoy the editing process
Love
as much as the writing? Or
Yeah. I really enjoy it. If I didn't have to pay for it and it wasn't a time constrained thing, I'd do it for the rest of my life.
Oh, really?
But I was talking to Lou the other day, and she said, "You've been studying for half our marriage. Do you think this will be enough?" And I said, "Funny that. I was thinking of doing a master's in military history after this."
Oh, I
she's
look
like,
forward to
"Yeah, no."
Yeah,
So,
don't do that.
No, she doesn't think I should.
Yeah. Is it just the research and putting it all together? Is that what you enjoy so much about it?
Yeah, that's part of it. It's very meditative, I reckon.
Ah.
Yeah. It's good fun.
Okay.
Well, it's good getting ideas on paper. It's good editing it. And I like making it, like getting a few photos, put some photos in.
Okay.
When I find some good stories, I love that. I've got some fun stories that I found.
That's cool. And we just watched a video of something that someone at my other work showed me of someone who got welcomed onto the BBC accidentally and just got stuck live on air. And you said you're writing your PhD is a little bit like that.
That's very much like that. Didn't he turn up to the BBC for something else and then they thought he was the person who was supposed to be interviewed?
He was there for a job interview.
Right.
And he had the same first name as the person that was going on to talk about, I think it was about to do with iTunes or something, or downloading music and streaming and things like that. And he'd obviously worked somewhere in the music industry, and he's originally from Congo, and he'd come to interview for a job, I think an IT job, and they just like ushered him on air. And now we'll put the video in the show notes.
It's like a rabbit with it in the headlights or a deer in the headlights.
He did quite well eventually. They kept asking him a question about downloading music. He's like, yes, people will download music everywhere.
That's funny.
But that's why is your PhD like that though?
Yeah, a bit of an imposter. I think I feel like I've got imposter syndrome sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes I think, why am I doing this? There's also an episode of the IT Crowd that was really similar to that, where this lady, Jen, came for a job interview and she didn't know anything about IT. She thought she was coming for a different job. And then she was being interviewed by the owner about getting this job as IT, and she so wanted a job, she just pretended she was an IT specialist. And then he said, "Tell me, what do you know about computers?" And then she said, "Well, emailing, keyboards, mouse clicking, right clicking, left clicking, sending emails, receiving emails." And then she got halfway through that little pattern and he goes, "Sounds like you're the perfect woman for the job, Jen. The job's yours." So yeah, I feel a bit like that with my PhD too.
That is the perfect job for you, even though you don't feel like it.
What, the IT?
No, writing the PhD.
Oh, look, I think I'm a bit of a storyteller. I'm not academically disciplined. I was an academic in my younger days, but I've lost all of that academic rigor, and the world's moved on in the last 30 years since I was studying at postgraduate at University of New South Wales in the 1990s, so that was a long time ago. So I'm having to relearn methodology. I'm having to relearn not to have fun with my writing. So I've got to just write and be critical and clinical.
Okay.
But I just want to have fun with it. So I think the feedback I keep getting is it's a bit It needs editing because I'll tell a story and then I'll tell another story, and so. But the whole thing is heaps of fun, and I like stretching myself. I challenge everyone. Like, it's really good to do something crazy in your life. Like, don't just do something that you know you can do. When you push yourself and you do something you don't know if you can do it, I think that makes life exhilarating. I used to feel like that when I surfed. I used to take off on waves and I wasn't 100% sure if I'd make it. That was exhilarating. I did nearly drown once, but other than that, it was pretty good. Skateboarding's like that. But yeah, a lot of physical exercises like that. But I think as Christians, we sometimes tend to be a bit more on the conservative side and not take risks, but I think taking some risks is fun. So that's what I like about it as well.
That's interesting. It plays into an article, Tim, that you sent me this week and that you've read about walking and the benefits of walking. And I did read it last night in preparation for this, but it's more to be about tech naked, isn't it?
That was a lot of it.
Tech naked or technique?
Tech naked. So not using your phone.
Yes.
Oh, tech naked. I had this image of you walking around South Village.
That was a different conversation we had about German nudists. That was a few weeks back.
With your German heritage, do you ever just feel the urge just to?
No, I did share that episode that it's not
speech?
part of my personality. It's not part of the affiliation that I feel.
That tradition didn't pass down.
Yeah, no.
As your family moved to Australia.
But no, the article this week from I can't remember the name of it. School of the Unconfirmed? Is that Unconformed?
I can't remember what the Substack's actually called.
We'll link it in the show notes below.
Yep.
But the concept was about, the importance of walking. We've talked about walking actually the last couple of episodes. We've just chatted a little bit about this. But so this article came up and I flicked it across and just taps into a lot of the things that we've talked about the way in which your brain engages. You think through problems when you're walking and you're not inputting. So you're not listening to music, you're not listening to podcasts, you're just actually just free for your mind to wander.
Naked tech.
Naked tech.
Yeah.
So you're tech naked.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have no technology with you, you're not being distracted by anything, you're able just to let your mind flow. And in that flow, often great ideas come. And there was some famous philosopher that's quoted in there, I can't remember which one it was, it talks about there's no problem that I haven't been able to think my way into or out of by walking. I
think that might have been Rousseau.
Was it Rousseau? Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was really tying into some of the things we've talked about the last few weeks, but about that deep thinking that happens because you are in motion, in movement, and not being inputting. So they talk about being either tech naked or naked tech, and the idea like you've got the types of phones like the either dumb phones or light phones or those kind of ones that don't connect to the internet but just make calls or texts, and therefore it greatly reduces the opportunity to be inputting, to be distracted. Actually, just anything you can do to help your mind flow is really positive.
Yeah, and it talks about like the benefits of walking in nature as well. But I thought there was a link between what you were saying, Stu, about you find it a bit meditative writing your PhD.
It's interesting, yeah.
And similar with the walking. And apparently there's a theory that suggests walking promotes spontaneous fluctuations in the mind that are similar to fractals. Do you know what fractals are?
No.
I can explain it. What?
It's that Frozen song. Fractals.
Frozen fractals or? Yep, it is. Yeah, I've listened to a lot of Frozen, given I have two daughters. A fractal is a pattern that roughly repeats across scales, like a tree whose few big branches have many smaller branches with even more leaves that look like tiny branches.
Oh, yeah, I get it.
So scientists have found that spontaneous neural activity follows a similar branching pattern throughout the brain. It has a related proportion of a few slow and strong frequencies to more faster and higher frequencies, which scientists call pink noise.
Yeah.
So not white noise or something else. It's fractal patterns are easy on the eyes as well and helps. Apparently these fractal rhythms of our heart synchronize with fractal rhythms of our lungs and our gait as we walk.
Yeah. So I like that idea that it's not an immediately obvious pattern, but there is a pattern there, and it's pattern enough that if your brain is allowed to think and consider it, you can actually get there.
And I was just wondering, is that kind of, do you think that tallies with what kind of how you've been writing your PhD, Stu?
Yeah, I think it is. I think in ministry too, there's a lot going on for people in ministry. There's there's doing and there's thinking. And at Soul Revival, we talk about working in the ministry and working on the ministry. And I think sometimes another phrase for it is the urgent and the important. There's a few different ways of looking at it. But I was when I went to SMBC in the 90s, there was a lecturer who talked to us about that some people in life, not only ministry, but particularly ministry, you can just get into doing things all the time, and all the urgent things just keep coming up on your calendar, the phone calls, the things that go wrong, and you don't get a lot of time to think about what you're doing. So working in the ministry is all the urgent things, but also the everyday things, the things you just got to do, rostering and writing sermons and stuff like that. But then working on the ministry is coming up with those, what some people call wildly important goals, that you can have things that you can work on that will move you to the next level. So if you look at some entrepreneurs, you'll see them always thinking of the next thing as well as working on what they're doing and making that better. So Elon Musk is, love him or hate him, he's a very good example of that he wanted to build a rocket. So he went to Russia to see if he could buy ex-Cold War nuclear weapon without the nuclear weapon in it, and just so he could have a rocket to start with. And they said no, but he just came back and just redesigned the space industry. But you only do that when you're thinking forward about things. I think walking, the PhD, I think showers are good for that. Yeah. Funnily enough, sleeping is good for that too, actually. Like I'll go to bed with a problem and then I'll wake up and the answer's there. It's like my brain
sleep on it.
Was ChatGPT and it was continuing to work on it offline.
I have heard that some people that write blog articles or posts will read a few different things and they go, I'm going to sleep on it, and then they write on that in the morning.
That's clever. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, there you go.
Because for some reason the brain is able to work on that as you're sleeping, like you said. That's pretty crazy.
And I know this is an input, but I think one of the things that I like about long-form podcasts, and others tell me that they like about it too, is it does actually give you permission to work on things in your life. So listening to people thinking deeply about something, you can cherry pick ideas and stuff, of course, but it also, I think, teaches me to think as I listen to other people think and talk about things too.
So just to clarify, you would call the PhD working on the ministry?
Yeah, I would definitely.
So what are I know that we've probably talked about this before, but what was the major motivating factor for you to write on this?
Well, I started the PhD in 1992 in the Department of Political Science at the University of New South Wales. And I wanted to write on the history of youth ministry because I had a particular interest in why are young people leaving the church? I don't understand. Because for me, I love the church. It's boring and it's a bit old-fashioned and there's parts of it that make me cringe. But on the whole, why would you... I felt a little bit like Peter, actually. That might sound a little bit grandiose, but when Jesus was telling everybody that you have to eat my flesh and drink my blood, and all the disciples left, and there's only a few left, probably 120 stuck around. So the free food was over, and now it was about, let's go from simple things to these deeper ideas of commitment. And I don't think I did that justice, but I just wanted to give a bit of context. But that whole moment was quite seismic for the disciples, because I suppose there's this sense of, am I going to walk off too, or am I going to stick around? Yeah. And I really love Jesus talking to Peter, and Peter's reply is, where else have I to go? You have the words of eternal life. So for me, youth ministry was a bit like eating my flesh and drinking my blood. It was a bit weird and a bit strange and a bit, didn't understand it, didn't connect with it all the time. But I really had a sense that I wanted to be with Jesus. And so when I did the PhD in the first place, that was almost like a burning question behind all the research. I didn't realise at the time that a PhD was just a ticket. You just do it and get it done so that you can start thinking more academically in the academic world. So I was very idealistic as a young person. And so my department head was saying that, suggesting that it might be good to write from a neo-Marxist point of view rather than a Christian point of view. And so at the time I thought, I just can't do that. I'm a Christian. Yeah. So I stopped the PhD. Also because the head of the department said, you're so busy now that your case study for this PhD, Soul Revival, which is what I was using as a case study to think of a new way of doing youth ministry. As I was doing the PhD research, I'm trying to go, why don't we just stop doing youth ministry and just be friends? And that's a lot simpler. I think Christians are going to find that a harder concept to get their head around, but non-Christians will find it an easier concept to get their head around, because rather than coming into our world and being part of this mechanism of a department of youth ministry within a church and all this kind of palaver, they can just say, well, the youth leaders look like they're friends and they're inviting me to be a friend too, so I might just jump in. So that's where I was going with it. I was looking at a new social movement theory, so that was really exciting because that was looking at the hippies from the 70s, 60s and 70s, and with the Jesus movement that came out of then. But yeah, just by changing Soul Revival to be a friendship group, we grew from 4 kids to probably 250 kids within a couple of years. And my supervisor and my head of department were fascinated by that. And my head of department said, maybe you should either write about Mother Teresa or be Mother Teresa. You can't really do both at the same time. And so that was in the back of my head. But I stopped the PhD and decided to be Mother Teresa. But I always thought I'd come back to it again. So it has a long legacy there. And so I've written and researched and done stuff informally for 20 years. And then I was at a meeting with some people and I was talking to someone about how I was thinking of writing a book. I'd just written a paper on Soul Revival, not very academic. It was just more a practitioner's take on things. And that was the first time I publicly talked about my ideas of the shock absorber.
Is that the briefing article?
Yeah, it led to a briefing article.
Yeah, okay.
So what happened was Graham Stanton of Youthworks College, who was the principal, invited me to be someone who presented. And so I did. And then I got that published in the briefing, which was fine. And then I was at some academic thing. Can't remember why I was there, but I was there to listen and learn, not present anything. I might have been asked to present something short and small as a practitioner, maybe. Maybe it was one of those kind of conferences. Anyway, I met this gentleman called Darren Cronshaw, and Darren said, what are you going to do with this? And I said, well, I'm thinking of writing a book about it. And he said, nah, don't write a book, do a PhD. And I said, oh, I don't know if anybody would want me in a PhD course. And he said, well, you got honours, didn't you, in political science at Sydney Uni? I said, yeah, I did. And he said, well, why don't you just come with us at the Sydney College of Divinity and you can do the PhD off the back of the politics, but you could do it cross-disciplinarily this time and you could write as a Christian. So that's what interested me. And I went, oh, that's good. And he said, the other thing about that is then people can peer review your ideas instead of just a book coming, not having a go at authoring a book, sitting next to Tim, who's far more accomplished in his writing in his academic career than me. But and your book, by the way, is terrific. If we can give it another plug.
Child in God's Church.
Child in God's Church. So I thought, oh, okay, so I'll start a PhD, and 7 years later I'm still doing it because being Mother Teresa and writing about Mother Teresa is probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Yeah. So trying to find the time to do the two is tiring. So
it sounds like
yeah. So I just had writing leave for 6 weeks, which has been terrific. But I was writing 10 hours a day, almost every day. But now I'm back at work again. I'm back to writing at nights to try and get it done. So I went to bed at 3:30 last night, for example. And yeah, I'm doing 2 or 3 of those a week. So it's not great for my health, but I feel like I'm at the end of my innings and I might just try and hit everything for 6 that comes to me.
So Glenn Maxwell against Afghanistan when he got injured and
did he?
In the World Cup, the most recent Cricket World Cup, Australia were in trouble against Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And he got injured. It's like did his hamstring or something. He just stood there and hit 6s and he scored 200 in the 1 day.
Well, you either score 200 or you go for a golden duck, don't you? So, but it's high stakes. So it is high stakes to be pushing myself so hard. But and I think my health could be better because I'm not spending a lot of time on that. Walking is inspiring to me. I should get more into that.
Yeah,
and you live right near the bush. That'd be great, wouldn't it?
Just time.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, the PhD's been hopefully. I would love it to be helpful. So that's all. I don't think it's going to be great or anything. I just want to finish it and get it done. I have days where I don't know if I'm going to get it done. And sometimes I get comments from my supervisors and I think, I don't know if they think I can do it. I got a similar comment earlier in the year off one of my supervisors who said, are you maybe in a season of your life where you're a bit busy? Do you think you might need to do this in another season of your life? And I politely just said, I'll keep persevering as long as you guys don't think I've gone too long, but I don't think I've got another season. I think I'm coming out of autumn into winter now, so I think I need to use this season to get it done. But I'd really like it to be helpful for our church at Soul Revival. I'd love it to be a legacy project where people can choose to use it or not, but at least know what we're kind of trying to do. And also, if it helps other Christians in other contexts, that'd be wonderful, because I have a massive heart still that a lot of young people are still leaving the church. And I think the topic is still really, really relevant. But it's been good being a youth minister for 20 years and a church planner for 10, because now I've got a better kind of idea of what I'm doing. Because when I was only 22, I didn't know what I was doing at all. I was kind of like Kurt Cobain without being able to play an instrument.
Right.
Probably look more like a vagrant than Kurt Cobain.
I don't know. He did a pretty good job of looking like a vagrant, didn't he? I mean, your push for new ideas is what I find really interesting and fascinating. And it reminds me of this. This is a business strategy, but it's called Blue Ocean strategy.
I've read that.
Yeah, and it's like most companies competing in the red oceans where it's crowded with rivals and competitors. But a blue ocean, on the other hand, is an uncontested market space. And there's this line that I've found is like, instead of fighting to win a bigger slice of the same pie, you bake a whole new one. I thought that was interesting. But before we get on to how you are...
When did that ethos
it was a
first
book.
get written down?
I can't remember. I think it would have been in the 2000s.
Yeah.
But I can't remember when it actually... The book was published in 2005.
Yeah, because when I read it in 2005, that was very validating for me, because when we first started our youth ministry at Guymer Anglican Church, I looked at all the churches in the Sutherland Shire that were all competing with each other for the same kind of people. And the Christians in Sutherland Shire were like a herd of wildebeest that kind of just sort of grazed across the savannah. Every now and again, the next church that was the season of the month, everyone would go to that, and then they'd all leave that and go to the next one and all this sort of stuff. But particularly in Guymer, we were under the shadow of a very big church that's one of the biggest in Australia, Guymer Baptist Church. And they used to have our young people, we used to have our young people who were Christian leaving our church to go to Guymer Baptist, because that was the big one. And I remember thinking, if we just, not that it's about a competition, but if we just do the same thing as Guymer Baptist, we can't do it as well as them. So what's our blue ocean that we can find? And that's why we delved into community, but also in the crowded space in Sydney Anglicanism in the 90s. And Ruth LeCabio has written this up in what she called the Youth Ministry Wars of the 1990s, which I think I gave her the phrase wars because she interviewed me for the project, and then I think she used that, because I said it was like a youth ministry war at the time, but a war of ideas. It wasn't a negative. But I remember there was the whole no guts, no glory of youth ministry is just a Bible study. And then on the other hand, there's the cultural approach of Tim Hawkins and Cameron Hislop at Generative Anglican that had kind of reinvented the Jesus movement paradigm of a Friday night youth group with fun and games to reinvigorate it for another generation with some more discipleship. But that was a big debate between those two in the 90s. But then here's little old Soul Revival doing its own thing with no credos, no academic stuff behind it, and we were doing something brand new. So that whole search for an entrepreneurial way of doing something came from, if we just keep doing the same thing all the time, we're going to keep getting the same results. And so if young people, at the end of the day, I suppose I took for granted the Bible is the cornerstone of our ministry. Discipleship is really important. But then if we don't get involved in mission, we're going out backwards. Not that, at the end of the day, God is sovereign, and, he's going to call who he's going to call. But because I do believe in predestination, I'm very comforted by that, actually, which is something for another day. But knowing that God calls us is very encouraging. However, he asks us to partner with him. And I think we have to take that partnership really seriously. And my fear was I didn't want to bury my talents, so that the talents he'd given me, I buried them for lack of, in fear, actually. Like I don't want to look silly. I don't want to do something different. I don't want it to fail. I want to somehow make my mark in this place. And I think people compete in the same market because they want to become important as well as successful
in
within
that
established culture.
Yeah.
It's quite fascinating to me, particularly with the massive story of the growing of America, how, there were these backwoods guys and women who used to go out by themselves into the forests of America, like just looking for new places. And then pioneers would go out and start new things. And of course, there's a whole heap of complexity in that with the First Nation peoples and stuff. But I find that whole explorer impulse fascinating. And I think as Christians, maybe we've lost a bit of that sometimes. Maybe it's a bit of a cringe because of the colonial past, that mission has been now tied to the colonial expansion of European powers. But that missionary impulse to go into new places and do things in a new way. Now we live in a globalist world where we kind of feel like everything's been done. You know, all the mysteries out of the world. I love mysteries. I love mystery. I've actually got a passion for the X-Files. I love the X-Files. And in the X-Files, Mulder has this poster behind him with a UFO that says, "I want to believe." Now, I don't believe in UFOs. I don't really want to. But I like the mystery of, is there a Loch Ness monster? Is there a Tasmanian tiger? And often I find in Christian circles, when I talk about stuff like that, even for fun, people just shut it down. No. But I find that a pretty sterile, kind of sad, sedentary existence if everything is known. And the most exciting thing you can do in a day is sit around and have a cup of tea and stir your sugar into your tea. That's a bit boring. So I kind of think that blue ocean idea is also free. You don't have to pay any money. You don't have to get any qualifications. You don't have to have any permission. So all of that is so exciting to me. And I think that's the impulse that's driving us to Mars, actually, because no one's giving SpaceX permission to do it. They just want to try. And everyone's laughing at them because they are trying, but I'm not laughing. I'm like, I think it's exciting that people are still trying to push the boundary. So how do we as a church do that? The PhD is part of that. It's part of a telling of that story because it's an autoethnography. So I'm telling a little bit about my story. It's ethnography, so I'm hearing how other people feel about that as well, but also looking at it in the context of common ways of doing youth ministry now, looking at how it's a little bit different to that. But also, I think what I've discovered in the last 6 weeks is a whole new way of looking at youth ministry again. So I'm really excited about how this research is making me feel young again, because I feel like back in the 90s I thought, why don't we just be friends? And that was exhilarating because no one else was doing it. I'd go to conferences and people would say, so do you do Bible study in your youth group or do you do fun and games? I said, we do both. Oh, okay.
No,
that's not very
strategy.
interesting. Well, what's new about Sorrowville? What is it doing? Well, we're friends. Oh, well, what do you do? Well, we hang out on Saturday night as youth leaders. And then there's silence, just crickets. Because it's sort of like, well, we don't want to do that. And I think it's almost like one of those people who are hunting, fur traders. I know fur trading's kind of not very politically correct, but those guys that went out into the woods in America and came back with a whole load of furs and took it to the market or whatever. And I think people probably appreciated the furs, but there's no way they were thinking, I might do that for a living too, go out in hostile territory and nearly starve to death and nearly freeze to death and get attacked by a brown bear and all this kind of stuff. So I think the blue ocean is costly and not many people want to go out there. And that's what makes it the exact place I want to be. Yeah.
I think that probably drives the fear of people trying to do it as well, like you're saying, because it's costly.
Yeah, I think so. I think people are looking to give people credit. Two things. First of all, Paul said he didn't want to build on someone else's ministry. He just wanted to do his own ministry. And you could think he's a bit of a narcissist and an egotist, but I think what he's really saying there is, look, this is already established. It's already going. That's good. And I don't actually want to claim any benefit from the people who started this. I just want to try and start another ministry and grow the gospel. So if the blue ocean is the opportunity for the gospel, then I don't think it is narcissistic or hedonistic or individualistic to want to explore. And there was another book came out, I've forgotten the name of it now, around the same time as the Blue Ocean book, that was talking about pioneers and settlers in the church. I got given that book in the 2000s as well. And I think that is spot on with Soul Revival. I don't think we are a settler church. I think we're a pioneer church. And that book, again, used the maybe politically incorrect motif of a wagon train going west on the Oregon Trail. But the idea is, why did people leave the east coast of America to go and look for new places to live? what sort, and not only why, but what sort of person does that? Because not everybody wants to do that. And what sort of person sets up Tombstone? A couple of years ago, I got the massive privilege of going to Tombstone. That was set up by an ex-guy from the American Army who was a silver prospector in his spare time, and his mates laughed at him thinking he was crazy. But he found Tombstone, and he found a silver seam in Tombstone, and he said he was going to start mine there. And the town is called Tombstone because his mate said that the only thing you'll find there is your own tombstone. So he called the town Tombstone. And then that was where the gunfight at the OK Corral was, where the Earps were and all this fun stuff there. But you go there and the silver mine's still there. And the funny thing is there's still a little bit of silver in there. And they say, you know, if you follow a seam, you might find another whole seam. So Christianity is also like mining. It's also like pioneering. You go to something that most people go won't work. But when it does work, Tombstone became the Las Vegas of its time. And they were even importing fresh oysters and prawns or shrimps to this Arizona town that even now takes even 4 hours to drive from Phoenix. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's right down on the Mexico border. But it had ice cream. Wyatt Earp didn't used to drink alcohol. He used to eat ice cream, play pool. So who would have thought, you know? So my passion for the church is, you know, who are our pioneers who will go out and set up a new town, because then the settlers will come to it. So then it will become a red space, and then we have to go and look for another blue space. That's kind of how I see it anyway. Yeah. That's what I feel like my PhD's doing.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And I think we're going to talk about some of the ideas about it'll come from baking a whole new cake. But I was just going to ask you, Tim, because you've been helping Stu a little bit. Are you seeing the elements of that Blue Ocean strategy come out in, because you're helping with interviews, right?
Yeah, I've been doing a few of the interviews with people who have been part of the Soul Revival community, whether it was the young adult community at Gymea at some point, or whether they're part of Soul Revival Church, or both. And what are they noticing? What are they looking back on? So that's been really good to be a part of that and to help, you know, share in Stu's PhD.
Is there what have you seen come out of those interviews that does that match with what Stu's talking about?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's lots of really interesting things that have come out of that. People's stories, people noticing to go back to last week's conversation about the commitment. So some people looked at the level of commitment that was being asked, particularly of the leadership teams, and found that really life-giving and generative, and have really fond memories of being so entangled in each other's lives that you were living in each other's pockets for 5 days a week. And so found that really exciting and you know, life-giving, generative, all those kind of things. And there's other people who are like, I felt worn out and I just felt like I couldn't do it. And so they felt that they couldn't do what was being required of them for leadership teams. And so that's been an interesting thread that has come out. One of the other things that has come out, and this was a couple of interviews I've done more recently, is both a parent of people who are at Soul Revival at Gymea, and also someone who was themselves one of those children, teenager, young adult at Gymea. Both made comments on different days of how Soul Revival made being a Christian seem cool, which the comment, I think, was not that we were trying to be cool and therefore cool people wanted to hang out with us and became Christians. It wasn't that. It was more that there was such a confidence in Christ being the defining factor of our lives. There was no cringe about that of like, oh, it's a little bit embarrassing, but I'm a Christian. Like, it was just like, no, I'm a Christian, and this is what it looks like. And we're wearing Jesus beads on our shoes at school, and we're, you know, colouring our hair in Jesus bead colours. And there was a year group that wore, like 5 mates from church wore the Jesus coloured tuxedos to their formal, like one green, right, white, black, red, yellow,
and skater shoes,
because there was that confidence that at a public school, at a public school graduation party where there's going to be, you know, I'm sure that there were drugs, drinking, you know, abusive substances and everything else that was happening, And it was just really natural for these people to go, yeah, and my identity is a Christian, and I'm literally wearing my identity in a really confident, not cringy, not apologetic, just this is who I am, isn't this awesome kind of way. And there was that mixture of confidence and frivolity with that, this joyfulness of being Christian, that I think both of this parent and this young, well, they were a teen and young adult at the time, both noticed about being part of this blue ocean idea of, hey, what if we try something new? What if we actually weren't apologetic about being Christians and actually we're just super confident and just said, yeah, we're Christians. Isn't this awesome? Like, it's awesome to be a Christian. And so that spilled out into the culture of the group. So that was one of the things. There are a couple of threads that have come out recently that tie into the stuff that Stu's finding.
So it wasn't being cool as in terms of a status thing. It was
No.
It was cool to have that, like to be proud or confident in your identity.
Yeah, so it wasn't looking externally to go, oh, how can we be cool?
Yep.
And I've got to watch MTV so that I know what culture is, and so I know what the right shoes to wear are, and I know what the right outfits are, and I know what the right language is, and if I can emulate MTV, then I can be cool. And then if I'm cool, like MTV is cool, then people at school will be like, oh, you're Christians, but you're cool. That's interesting. And I think that's a trap. It's the same kind of trap that we look to like Christian celebrities and go, well, being Christian's not daggy. Look, Alice Cooper's a Christian, or so-and-so is a Christian.
Matthew McConaughey
is a Christian. So like, it's not daggy to be a Christian. Like you're using external coolness and you're trying to get coolness from a cultural factor and bring that into Christianity.
Place it over the top.
Yeah, like it's this cool veneer over the top. And both of these people weren't noticing that. They were noticing, no, it was the identity being formed as Christians that was, because it was so confident, that's what brought the coolness. And so, I mean, you can see how this works in popular culture. So, the whole idea of Kurt Cobain and Nirvana, like, coming out on stage in their pajamas and like just thrashing their guitars and screaming, and like, oh, that's weird. But they're so confident about it. Yeah. They're not apologetic about their style that all of a sudden everyone wants to be like Nirvana, and every record label is trying to find the next Nirvana. And so their confidence in just being who they are was what made it cool.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing but it was the Christian faith. It was Jesus. It was communion around God. It was brothers and sisters in Christ and community and this commitment to each other. And people go, oh, you're so unapologetically self-confident about this, and you're not striving for models of coolness or from the external world. You're finding it in yourself. That's cool. And I can be confident in my faith. So I think that was really, so that was really interesting.
I think the attractiveness of coolness is actually, you're actually, like you like the confidence that someone or a group is showing, whether it's real or not.
Right.
So like it's even something you're projecting that looks like you're confident, and you can talk about how some people are insecure even though they do this so they look cool, blah, blah, blah. But I think what you're touching on is that you can also come from a genuine, true confidence built on the foundation of Jesus, and then therefore you can go and live out in a way that is different and be okay with it. And that, I think that's maybe, if I'm speaking again from my experience as well, was like, oh, I can live like this, and because other people are living like this, but because their confidence is on that foundation of Jesus.
So I was consciously doing that. Like I was like, that's the power of a movement. The movement is like you've got to be a woodsman. You've got to go off. But unlike the woodsman, you've got to have a wagon train. You've got to have a vision for something, something precious. So what led a lot of people to risk their lives to go to the West Coast was gold. So it was a precious metal, literally. And they literally were an embodiment of Jesus' parable of they sold everything they had to buy a piece of land because in the land there was something precious. So for me, it's like, how do I explain that? Okay, so I stand at Guymer Anglican Church one night, the only young adult left in the church. There's no one in their 20s left. All my mates all 40 of them had gone. And I prayed and I said, God, do you mind if I go to Gymea Baptist too? And then I had a flush of conviction, and I thought, I think God wants me to stay here. And so I said, God, I'll stay here for the rest of my life. So leaving Gymea was so hard because there were some rumours, Stuart always planned to leave Gymea and start his own church, and he was preparing for years, and the conspiracy theory. And I was like, nah, it's nothing further from the truth. I just spent 40 years of my life in community because I believe that Jesus calls us to be the church, and we should be committed to him and committed to each other, not just committed to Jesus. In a world where no one's committed to local church, in my world, no one was committed to it. They just went where they wanted to. So it's like you can get your fill of God in any petrol station. So you look for the one with the best convenience store. So here I am standing there saying, God, I'll do it myself. But then I thought, how am I going to get anyone else into it? I don't know. But I thought at least I've reduced transients by one. And I remember thinking, this is just going to be a hard slog. And it has been for the whole of my life. There's been two things that have been hard. One is trying to come up with something new to I don't like that word deconstruct. I don't deconstruct theology, but change the way non-Christians see the church. Because we're just like, there's a great Russian parable, which I think we've said on the podcast before, of this Russian village. The circus comes once a year. Every time the circus comes, the clowns get dressed up and they run ahead of the circus to get everybody pumped. And they run into the town and they're funny and everyone comes and they laugh. And by the time the crowd's formed, the wagon trains come and then the dancing people are there and the elephant and all this sort of stuff, right? Anyway, one day the wagon train's coming over the hill and there's a bushfire. They can see it on the other side of the mountain coming down to the valley. And the wagon train say to the clowns, you're already dressed, quick, go into the town and warn everybody that the bushfire's coming. So they run into the town, and of course the people all come out and they're laughing. But the clowns are like, no, don't laugh. No, we're not here to be funny. There's a fire coming. And they went, oh, how hilarious, a fire's coming. That's new. We haven't heard you do that one before. And no, anyway, the fire came and they all died because the people that were there were clowns and they thought they were clowns. And I remember hearing that parable thinking, they think we're clowns. So, the youth minister will go to the school and run scripture. No one cares. No one listens. No one thinks it's relevant. Back in the day, it wasn't that it was evil and wrong and corrupt like people think sometimes we are now. It was more irrelevant. Like I like going up the pub and listening to the Angels at Carrying Bar Pub. I can't think of anything better than that. And rock and roll was like an addiction back then. Like it was so visceral.
Oh, the pub scene.
But it wasn't just the pub scene. It was just the music itself was, for my generation, I think it was just incredible. It probably is still today, I don't know. But like music, you'd never think music would challenge the gospel, but it did because it had a whole different philosophy behind it, which was hedonistic, and you don't have to have any boundaries. You can do whatever you want. So here's these clowns coming to school telling us about the coming bushfire. Oh, you're just clowns, We've got you guys sorted. And so I went up to school one day when I was to start being a scripture teacher, and I'm going, they think I'm a clown. Like, how am I going to not be a clown? And I was carrying my Bible with me, and I thought, well, Kurt Cobain just gets up and says whatever he thinks. And he isn't trying to be 80s glam rock. He's just being Seattle grunge music. I'm just going to be a Christian. And that was the thing that I'd thought to myself all the way through my life. For some reason, I've been a Christian that hasn't needed Christian friends, hasn't needed any support. I just want to be with Jesus. And so even in primary school, I was asking my friends to come to church and praying for people. Like there was a football star that broke his neck in the 70s, and I read an article in the newspaper that he was never going to walk again. I just started praying that God would heal him. And for some reason, I prayed for that guy every night for 17 years. And it just so happened that I was walking to uni one day, and on a newspaper, I saw the heading, footballer who was paralysed has new treatment, is walking again. And I picked up the paper, and it was the guy I've been praying for. And right up until then, 17 years, I've been praying for him every day. I don't know why I did that. Like that, no one told me to do it. Didn't feel like I had to do it. I just wanted to do it. I don't know. Now, I'm not trying to big note myself at all, but I think that's part of that explorer kind of thing. Like, no, I used to tell people I was praying for this guy still, and they thought it was cute. And clownish. Even Christians thought it was clownish. So when you go to church and you say, I want to try and get all the kids to come to church, I had an old lady say to me, look, Stuart, no unchurched kids come to this church, and they never will. And then I realised I'm a double clown. I'm a clown up at the school and I'm a clown in the church. And I think that's been my burden for my whole ministry that I've come to as I'm writing my PhD. I'm a clown. And so I've really tried over the years to go, I didn't put all the makeup on and pick the shoes and the funny big baggy pants with dots on them. I got given those by other people. So the cultural manifestations of our faith have been given to me by other people. And we've got all these models and these metaphors and these ways of doing things. Christians know, non-Christians know exactly what we're doing. So we have a men's night and we have a speaker, right? And he's a footballer. I'm a chaplain to the Sharks. I still have people ring me up occasionally and say, can you get one of the footballers to come to our church? We're having a men's night and we're going to, get all the non-Christian guys to come to hear the footballer. And I'm like, okay. So the pattern is the footballer comes, tells them about football because they've come to hear about the football. It's a bit of a bait and switch. And then all of a sudden, they all wear their Sharks jerseys and they're all like rah-rah and they're drinking non-alcoholic beer and they're having sausages and, this is the whole let's eat meat thing, but let's not go too far. Like, let's have some non-alcoholic beer. So the non-Christian comes along and is like, non-alcoholic beer, okay, cool. I wonder what the sell is. And I don't think any Christians think about that. I don't think Christian ministers go, they know that there's something on sale here. They're wondering what it is. And they know what we're doing, that they're going to try and bait and switch because they're not stupid. And so then at the end of the night, they go, we might interview the dude. Let's interview the dude. Okay, cool. And he tells some stories, fun stories, blah, blah, blah. And then they say, don't you follow Jesus? Yeah, I do actually. Oh, tell us about that. And the non-Christian's like, here we go. Here's the pitch. Mm-hmm. And then it's like an Amway. So I think, it's almost like pyramid selling. It's like your friend asks you over for dinner and you rock up and, he's wearing a suit. Why is he wearing a suit? And then he gets a whiteboard out and he's saying, well, what I want to do actually is ask you to help me sell perfume. It's kind of like that. You come to a men's night and then they go, we've got a little card if you've been moved to become a Christian yourself. Sometimes the gospel's not even told. Sometimes they just say, I'm a Christian and it changed my life. So if you want to become a Christian, here's the card. And they hand the card out and everyone gets a card and a pencil and they just sort of go, okay. And the non-Christian goes, I thought my mate was just my friend and he was asking me out for a night out and he wants me to sell perfume. Like, that's not cool. So you get that on the one hand from non-Christians, but we're still playing the game. We're still sending the clowns in all the time. And I don't want to be too critical of us. Like, you got to do something. But I think the non-Christian world in Sutherland Shire in the 90s had worked out what youth ministry was. They had all been to youth groups. They knew the games were there to get you to listen to a talk, and then the supper was there to give you a hook to come back next week. And most of your mates didn't care, and most of your mates went behind the dunnies and had a smoke and maybe sold some drugs. Or we had a guy come into our youth group actually at Guy Anglican who was selling stolen lighters that he'd stolen from the shops. I didn't find out until he was an adult and he told me, and I thought, wow, okay, cool. He was selling lighters. Everyone was calling him the Lighter King. This little 14-year-old kid coming along,
But he's still at our church, right?
He's still at our church, yeah. He's a flaming legend. Very dear friend of mine.
Flaming legend. Is that a
I like that.
pun there?
I like that. Anyway, I'm probably going on too long because I haven't been here for 2 months. I'm giving you 2 months of stuff. But what I think happens at school is you go as a clown. So you kind of go, how do I stop being a clown? So then I thought of Kurt Cobain. I thought we've got to remodel ourselves. We just got to do it differently. And that's why I said, let's just be friends. And then they're like, so what's the hook? And I said, there isn't any hook. Just
hang out.
Well, why do you want to be friends with me? I want to be friends with you because I'm a Christian and I love Jesus and I want to love you. And if Andrew Root has written about this in 2008. He started to explore this space with reimagining incarnational ministry, which is seeing teenagers as a statistic. How many kids can we get Christian and how many kids in the youth group? Changing that to be more relational, and that very old Jim Rayburn policy of like, be cool to get the kids to come to youth group was a bait and switch. So Andrew says, just love them, be a Christian. And I think that's really good. I think we've got to be really clear what we're doing is still the same message. And you're not going to get people to become a Christian because they become friends with you. But if you go in not as a clown, if one of those clowns in that Russian village could somehow have not dressed up by the time they saw the fire, they could have sent him running in. He wouldn't have had those funny floppy feet, so he would have been able to run quicker. And when he got in there, he could say, I'm from the circus, we've come over the hill, and I can see a fire. It's about clarity. It's about making the message stand out, not all the stuff around it stand out. Because all the stuff we've put around Christianity, for example, books in the 90s that were evangelistic books, I'm not having a go at them, but they caused us all sorts of grief in the 2010s because they put all these analogies in these gospel books to try and explain the gospel in a cool way to kids. So things like, not having to go at John Dixon, but one of his analogies got him into a bit of trouble in the 2010s because he said sex outside of marriage is like driving a Datsun instead of a Ferrari. So that's the clown show. Like, people hear that Ferrari thing and then they get all hooked up on it. Maybe some kids were convinced to be a Christian and wait till they got married because of that. You know, I'm sure there were. But in the 2010s, it's a clown show. Oh, there's what are Christians sex shaming people for? You know that. But it's not the gospel that was sex shaming people. It was the analogy. So I got to thinking, the blue ocean is to run into the village without the clown suit on. But then the problem is, even when you take your clown suit off, the people in your church still think you're a clown, but for a different reason, because you're so optimistic not to do things the way everyone else has done it. They want you to do it the way that they do it and do it well, so that their church can be a preparatory church where the young people can come and then they'll grow up to be like us. But you can't get people in a Russian village to join the circus.
Yeah, right.
You've actually got to let them be in the village and be themselves in the village. And the ideal of a circus is once a year you have a bit of fun, but it might teach kids how to juggle. It might teach kids how to, I'll be funny, lion tame, you know, get yourself a lion and tame. But what I think's happening with my PhD is I'm sort of thinking all that stuff's coming together. I've used 5 or 6 different analogies, but at the end of the day, you can't just go and be a clown. You actually have to get people to follow you. So how do you get people to want to follow you? It's to tell them there's gold in the hills. And it's not about the journey. It's not about me. It's not about the town we're going to build. There's silver in that town. That's what got people to move there. And all the other stuff came because of the silver. In that case, it was a pretty corrupt and horrible place to live. I can imagine people shooting themselves all over the place. But for us, we have treasure in Jesus and in the gospel, and we're just jars of clay. So how do we go back from being clowns to jars of clay? That's kind of what I think the blue ocean is all about.
Tim, you got any reactions to... Stu did a lot of analogies there. Have you got any?
There's a lot going on.
I think about like it's putting the being a bold, confident Christian at the start to let people know about the gospel rather than bait and switch. That was the one of the things that I picked up is that there's a clarity about being a bold Christian and focusing on that. That's why we want to be friends with people.
Well, it was to get you guys to think a bit about, I suppose, with all those different analogies tied together. I did try and tie them together with that image of
the clowns.
Well, the clowns and the prospectors and everyone are all travelling to somewhere. They've all got a goal. They've all got some kind of message. We sometimes are a bit of a clown show. I think I am. But the first follower principle is really powerful to finish on, and then I'll throw back to you. But there was a video that went viral in the early days of the internet, which was a guy dancing at a music festival.
Oh, yeah.
And he was crazy. His arms are going everywhere and he didn't look cool at all. If he hadn't been joined by someone, he would have just been a crazy guy. But then the first follower got up and danced with him, but copied his dancing. And then after one person got up, then everyone gets up. So what you have to think about in ministry is your idea about making the gospel clear going to get a follower? Because once you get the first follower, people are actually following the first follower, not the person with the idea. So the challenge for me in youth ministry was not for me to be Kurt Cobain and get people to follow me, but to convince other people that Jesus was worth being silly for. And the funny thing is, I'm not saying, in a funny way, I'm saying we have to stay clowns in order to do that. Because there's going to be some people who don't think you are, but there are some people who clicked on that video to laugh at the guy who was dancing like an idiot. And there are other people who are clicking on the video because they thought that was cool and it inspired them. So that's the reality. We're always going to inspire passion and hate when we do something different.
Do you feel inspired, Tim?
Very, always. I think that is important. And I think that first follower idea. I'm about to teach this in my class next week. It's my last class for the semester, and it's all about this idea of how do you bring change, and that idea of being the first follower being so key. And the idea that, and this is where, the pioneer needs the settlers, like they need to be working together in order to establish the town. Like if the pioneer just goes out and then just sits in a tent, then it's just one dude sitting in a tent.
It's not a town.
It's not a town. So
I love that.
So you need it's important to have both. So if you don't have the pioneers, then you get stagnant. But if the pioneer doesn't have followers, then you don't get a town. You just get a tent. And so those importance of those things working together and inspiring the people who can be the followers, the first followers, or even the second, third, fourth followers. And there's that idea of the adopter graph where there's the pioneers and then the early adopters and then the early majority, the late majority, and then the holdouts. And so you got this kind of big bell curve of an idea. And so I think what's really exciting about Stu's PhD is he's able to write up what he did as the pioneer, and people like myself who are not pioneers but can be first followers and can come in and help settle the town. And I think I don't think I'm good at the blue ocean idea, but now that we've got a bit of a town set up, I think what I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, church is telling this message, the schoolyard is telling this, the schoolhouse is telling this message, and the saloon is where everyone's hanging out. What if we draw these threads together and actually say, you're all telling the same story, let's help us understand the story. So I'm not good at being the blue ocean person, but I can come and help the settlers work out, hey, this is why this works, and help all the stories come together and unite and be able to say this. So I think that's why I really value the friendship that Stu and I have, is because, with all of his pioneering, I go, oh, right, that makes sense. Now I can, follow in the slipstream and go, let's pull some threads together and write this up in a way that is helping others get from the pioneers to the early adopters into that early majority. And so, that's our hope for some of these ideas, and why we keep doing the podcast is we do think there's this idea of being a Jesus-shaped, confident Christian community, third place, all these different phrases that we use to explain what was so novel about this particular approach, is it is gaining traction. And what we're so thankful that people who are listening and responding and interacting with us is that there are people who are following and go, I actually like this idea. And they don't have to be pioneers, but they can say, I'm going to be early adopters of this way of being a church that is committed to each other, committed to Jesus, and being light and salt in the world, all the different analogies that you can kind of throw in there. But I think that's what's really important about why we keep committing this time to do the podcast and to communicate this, for Stu to write his PhD, to get that published, peer-reviewed, then to write it up in a book so it's published and there's an artifact that we can say, this is what it looks like. Oh, I get it now. I can see it. I can, it was a little bit ethereal for me. I didn't quite grasp it. But now that I can read about it and make notes and interact with it, okay, I've got more of an idea and handle on it now. So, and that'll help the early adopters become late adopters. It will start to bring in late adopters as well, because it's now a reputable, peer-reviewed one, and it doesn't just have the anecdotal evidence of it having worked in a particular setting, but actually people go, this is actually legitimate. And I think that's really, really important, and way that you and I as followers can help keep pushing these ideas forward.
Yeah, I think that's I've been reading this essay called High Agency in 30 Minutes. It's by a guy called George Mack, and I found out about it on the Modern Wisdom podcast, which we've mentioned a number of times before. But there's a few quotes from it, but one of them is, once you see it, you can never unsee it. It's arguably the most important personality trait you can foster. And then he uses an example of someone. There was in 1964, there was a public inquiry about the film The Lovers, and it should be banned for its adult content. And he uses the example, the Supreme Court judge Justice Potter was asked to define pornography, and he replied the ultimate non-definition of "I know it when I see it." So it's hard to describe high agency, but you know it when you see it. And one of the ways he says to define if someone is high agency, you ask yourself this question: if you were stuck in a third world prison, you had to call someone to get you out, and you, like, someone sticks a phone under the door, you can only get one phone call. Who are you going to call? And it's probably going to identify the most high agency person you know. And funny thing, I thought about that for a while, and I thought of you, Stu.
Well, I'd put on my...
if you get a call from a Russian prison,
I'd put on my...
As a clown on the phone.
I'd put on my raccoon fur coat and my raccoon hat with my little tail on and pick up my musket and get on a plane to Moscow.
There you go.
With my little bear trap.
Yeah. There's one question I wanted to ask you, and it was something that you have said to me, Stu, a big thing has come out of your PhD. And you guys can go back and forward on this, I think, because you actually came up with the idea, the title of it, which was generational, intergenerational. Is that right? Is that
generative?
Generative. Thank you. I was there when you were talking about it. I was just observing the conversation. Do you want to tell us how you got to that, but then also what that actually means? Because there's a lot of
So I came up with the word generative, intergenerational, because we were calling what we do moderate intergenerational, and a number of times on the podcast I've used that phrase because I haven't been able to think of anything else. Wind back the clock just a little bit. When the book 4 Views of Youth Ministry came out, I got a little bit excited when I read Milan Nell's inclusive congregational model, because I thought, that's closest to what I'm trying to do that I've ever heard. That's really cool. And he's from South Africa. And then I read his précis, and I thought, it's not really what I'm doing though, because he was wanting to get rid of youth ministry altogether and just have back to before the Industrial Revolution kind of idea where everyone does everything together. And it actually was before there was a thing called teenagers. But I think the actual thing that there are teenagers means that the world is a bit of a different place to the pre-industrial revolution. I mean, if you go back to 1790, the world looked a lot more like 3,000 years ago than it does now. And it's only a couple of hundred years later, but the world didn't change before they invented steam. When they invented steam, it opened the floodgates of the power looms and all this different technology, and the Industrial Revolution's been going ever since, right? So change is always part of our culture. So I'm thinking to go back to the Industrial Revolution is a noble aspiration. It also was something I gelled with because before I read Nell, I didn't like the way church was set up. So I was the first generation at Guymer Anglican Church to go through something called the homogeneous unit principle. It got set up in the 70s, and well-meaning adults thought culture is so different between teenagers and adults that we need to give them their own church service. And in fact, even now, the baby boomers don't want to worship the same as their parents do. So let's have 3 services. Let's have a traditional, a baby boomer, contemporary family service with rock and roll, and a youth service with rock and roll, which was basically folk music back in my day. And I was listening to The Cure and they were still playing stuff from the 70s, so it wasn't actually doing what they thought it was anyway. Never really worked in my opinion, so I didn't like it. But I also didn't like the fact, so I love the idea of being a family at the church. I love the idea of being with my elders, but I also love the idea of being with my friends and coming up with new ideas, blue sky thinking. Elders don't tend to get on the boat when you go out looking in the blue ocean. They want to stay in the red one. They're like, good on you. So I've been trying to wrestle with it, and I've been thinking, okay, we're not missional in that we don't just stop the youth group and go out to the skate park, as Chap Clark says. We're not preparatory, where we're just trying to reinvent the same culture each generation, like Wesley Black was saying. We're not, even though I've had dalliances with toying with the idea, we're not the strategic approach of Mark Center, who says that the youth ministry should be a church plant for a daughter church. So I'm like, are we a fifth way? So for years and years doing Berea, we've been talking about Sorrowville being the fifth way, and you've even used that phrase today, which is really interesting. But I've never sat with that. Like, we don't really, there are aspects of each of those different approaches that are soul revival, but I'm kind of thinking, what is it? Anyway, I was thinking generative intergenerational is blue sky thinking intergenerational ministry. So somehow bringing the experimentation of youth together with adults. And that's what we've been saying the shock absorber is all along. So I realised that it's actually a description theologically of, maybe theologically, I'm going to explore this next, but I think it's a theological explanation of the shock absorber, because I think that there's Deuteronomy 6 that says pass on the gospel to the next pass on the faith to the next generation, which is very ingrained in all our churches. So that's top-down transference of biblical values from one generation to the next. It's called top-down. It's mainly adult-inspired. But then there's also the whole shock absorber idea is that young people have something to contribute. And that's what I think is unique about Soul Revival, the amount of contribution we give young people. And we have labelled that as flexibility, particularly with regard to cultural understanding. So I've done a lot of research into culture shock theory, and I found that teenagers tend to be understanding cultural change more because they go to school. Because they're at school, they make friends with people who are different to themselves, and those friends are sometimes from different cultures, whether it be secular or music or technological or actually literally a different cultural background. And when they make friends with those kids, they are called, those kids in the culture are called host friends, host friendship in the literature. So the idea is that kids have these friendships with people in the world, and so they don't have cultural shock because they understand it, and they have active adaptation. So what they do is they take their identity and then they reorganize their identity based on being a Christian but being in that other culture. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So young people are generative because they come up with adaptations.
Yep.
And so what the literature says is you don't have culture shock if you adapt to it actively. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And
So that's what kids are doing in the shock absorber. That's why I'm so excited about the culture shock theory I've found, because the writers in that area are saying young people are culturally generative. And some actually use that phrase, but it's not used as a phrase in youth ministry yet. So people aren't calling it generative. And but the closest I've found, and there may be others, but Kenda Creasy-Dean is a great example where she says that youth ministry is like a laboratory where kids experiment with new ways of being Christian, and then they bring that into the rest of the church. So she says that happens. And why is that not the shock absorber? Well, the problem is it's not live. It's not happening live. Mark Center says that adults in the church don't listen to young kids until they turn 30. So literally the experiments that young kids have in the youth ministry, new ways of being a Christian, like playing guitars in church, take 10 years to get into the church, maybe 20 years. So there's this latency of adaptation that takes, and by the time they apply their ideas, they're no longer relevant. So the church is perpetually out of date.
And what actually happened was more of a strategic approach in that they just ended up forming their own churches with guitars.
Yeah, they did.
Rather
Yeah,
than
well,
bringing
whether
them
it be,
into-
yeah, that's interesting actually, because whether it's in the evening service or they go and start their own church, it's very true. In the 2000s, the whole emerging church and emergent church was that on steroids. I think what the homogeneous unit church people did, the granddaughter of the homogeneous unit principle, in my opinion, is the emerging church, because instead of staying in the church and having multiple services, they went, stag that, we're going to go and start our own church.
Yep.
And they started their own, even left denominations. So that was really interesting. But anyway, nearly finished. So you've got this generative, flexible youth ministry. Adults need to be involved. So as I've said 100 times, a shock absorber, if it is too flexible, it'll break, because it'll be just going up and down really quickly. It needs strength, and that's why we use high tensile steel to make shock absorbers. So what is the strength of the shock absorber? The youth are the shock absorber, but the way the adults integrate the ideas of youth into the congregation is they bring their biblical wisdom and they say, here's my life experience. So I've been saying that for ages. But then it occurred to me that that whole relationship is generative. It's not sedentary. And my concern for inclusive congregational ministries that I've seen in the Shire, a lounge room full of different ages where everyone's got the kids. I'm talking real intergenerational ministry, not just having the kids in for a song and then calling that intergenerational ministry, which is kind of how we've adapted it in a lot of churches in Sydney. Oh, the kids have come in, so we're intergenerational. We haven't just put them over there in their own separate space. But the problem with that logic is it's sedentary because the kids haven't got a space to explore. So if Kenda Creasy Dean's right, kids need separate spaces. But the intergenerational ministry despises separate youth ministries because they see it as a product of the Industrial Revolution and lately the 60s and 70s homogeneous unit principle. A lot of intergenerational authors are directly arguing against the homogeneous unit principle, and I think that's terrific. But what they create is a little bit of a helicopter environment for kids and youth where they're kind of, it's very preparatory as well. I think that's just my take on it. So you'll become our culture. We'll change the way we do, talk so you understand. So there's a bit of pedagogy there, but there's not cultural influence from the kids. So I'm thinking we need to have separate youth spaces and intergenerational spaces. That's not inclusive congregational, and that's not intergenerational ministry. So I need to call it something different. Moderate is boring because explorers aren't moderate. Mm-hmm. So that's why I decided to change the word moderate. And one day during my writing, I just wrote the word generative. And I went, yeah, I like that. It captured my emotion. It didn't just describe that it was just like a half-baked intergenerational ministry, which is what I was kind of calling it. The great moment was I came in and I told Tim, and he said, that's brilliant because Erik Erikson, who I hadn't read before, calls adults generative. So that blew my mind, and I didn't go to sleep that night. So I read all his stuff, and Tim was also really encouraging. He's like, I love that. That's really cool. Anyway, he said there's this book called Generative Church that's written from the point of view that for a church to be generative, it needs the old people who are in midlife to be embracing of young people and not live for themselves, but live to help the young people to achieve what they want to do, which is the shock absorber, but it's only half the shock absorber. Yep. So Kenda Creasy Dean's got half the shock absorber and Erik Erikson's got half the shock absorber, and the penny drops. Yes, the shock absorber is a brand new way of doing youth ministry that hasn't been done before. That's the gap in the literature. The gap in the literature is generative intergenerational ministry that has segregated youth spaces and accessible intergenerational spaces. And that's what I got excited about.
Wow. Yeah. And it also sounds like you're also saying if the shock absorber is too flexible, it could break. But also if it's too stiff from the top down,
that's right.
It could break. Too
rigid,
as well,
it
right?
break. Yeah, sorry, thanks. I neglected that bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's stopping kids going to church. That's what I'm going to say in my recommendations chapter. Right. I think I don't want too many metaphors in the paper, so I don't think I'll mention the clowns, but I might. I don't know. I love that metaphor.
That's cool.
I love being a clown too, but it's joyful actually. It's another podcast. We were talking about that this morning as well.
We'll do that next week.
But what I think is really cool about it is people are rightly very, very rigid with theology. What's really cool with the shock absorber is we have got a methodology that lets adults be rigid with the theology, that if we have a strategy of the shock absorber, we can bring a new practice up from the bottom with the young people, and the thing can move in the middle. So we don't move theologically. People are often surprised we're so conservative in our theology. They go, oh, wow, your church looks whacked. You must have a whacked theology too. Tell me about it. That's heaps cool. Like, are you deconstructionists? Are you progressive, this, that, and the other evangelicals or whatever? Because you definitely don't look like you're fundamentalists or whatever. Because, they'll come to church and I'll preach in a baseball cap and just be myself, really, not trying to put anything on. It doesn't look the same. There's a cafe, there's all that sort of stuff. But then when they hear what we believe, they're like, oh, you're just like the rest of the Anglicans. And I say... yeah. Sydney Anglicans. I say, yeah, that's a really good compliment. Thank you for saying that. And they get surprised. Oh, really? You want to be associated with them? Yeah, we're Reformed Evangelical. You're not afraid of that? No, not at all. Like, you can't do new things unless you have a solid theological foundation.
That's the confidence.
Because if you go, confidence. If you go out into the wilds without a horse, you'll die. So what is your horse? What is carrying you? What is the foundation of all the exploring? You don't want to ditch everything to go out into the ocean because you'll drown. With the blue ocean, you need a boat that won't sink in unexpected conditions. The best thing for unexpected conditions culturally is the gospel that never changes. And so I love Romans 12, which I think might be the shortest explanation of the gospel in verse 1, therefore in view of God's mercy. That's, in other words, therefore in view of what I've just told you in 11 chapters, that Jesus died for you, that we're all sinners and we need a saviour, that he rose from the dead. And that's why I love the atonement so much. It's the boat, it's the horse that carries soul revival. And then on top of that, you can go anywhere. So the shock absorber needs the strength, because the problem, I interviewed John Kitson, and the problem with the Jesus movement was John said, we started a commune, and we said the rule of the commune is that no one can come home by themselves any day. You have to bring a homeless person home. Beautiful aspiration. But he said he woke up one night and he had 5 homeless people in his bedroom, and they were snoring and smelly, and he couldn't get any sleep. He's like, this isn't sustainable. And then they had these big arguments. Should men and women be living in the same house? And they were having to reconstruct a sexual ethic. He said, we wasted so much time. Like, we did so much in our experimental space. But if we had have stayed contact with our elders, they could have helped us to understand that that's not sustainable. It's lovely. And yeah, look, try it. But and I'm not saying water it down, but here's some life experience I've had, The sexual ethic thing, it's all well and good to say let's live in a commune, but you're young people with heaps of hormones, and there'll be someone who'll be cleaning their teeth in the bathroom and that'll look attractive to you. You might not even be able to resist that, even something as mundane as that. So he said we kind of had to come back to the church. So they had this terribly painful leaving of the church in the 60s, and then they came back again in the late 70s. But they brought their divisions with them. So it was the Jesus people that segregated us up into the homogeneous unit principle. So I'm thinking, Relo Bash. Soul Revival has all the young people on Saturday night hanging out as friends, but what if once a month we bring all the old people to come, or once a term, and they can be our friends too? And we used to have 80-year-olds coming to Soul Revival, and these teenagers rock up going, what's with the 80-year-olds? And I think it's all summarised in that story I've already said 3 or 4 times, so sorry for long-term viewers and listeners. But I'm sitting next to an 80-year-old. She's sitting next to a 16-year-old who's talking to a friend. The 16-year-old girl says to a friend, young lady, says, I just broke up with my boyfriend, my life's over. The 80-year-old turns to her and goes, I know how that feels, sweetheart. I lost my husband in World War II. He never came back. We got married, and the day after we got married, he went over to Papua New Guinea and he never came home. And then all of a sudden this interesting dynamic happens, the shock absorber. You've got this young lady who's trying to work out how to live with this new experience of breaking up. And you have this older lady who's lived with that experience for 50 years. And the young girl says, how did you do that? She asked. She wanted to know. It wasn't forced on her by the older lady. See, it's not too strong. It's actually inviting conversation, right?
Which is the generative aspect.
It's generative.
Yeah.
It's alive. It's an interaction in relationship, not in a book on a page. And the young girl says, how did you do that? And she said the most beautiful thing. She said, Jesus is good, and he's been good to me, and he's looked after me. And I've got a friend who's a colleague, Shane Hanley, who said when he heard that story, he got Soul Revival. He went, oh, now I get it. Because what happened is that young girl then started ministering to that lady. It was beautiful. She went from being all anxious and uptight and my life's over, and then those two became friends. They started having cups of tea with each other every now and again. And when that old lady died, that young girl was standing there quietly at the funeral. And one of the things Dr. Bonamy said to me, that when we left Guyman Anglican Church, he stopped seeing young people coming to the morning service. But more importantly, he stopped seeing young people coming to funerals. And it's the natural gravity in our generation to be exclusive of difference and to be individualistic and to be threatened by the other. And if our churches give us safe spaces for difference, it makes such a difference. But if our churches don't, they're giving us a tacit approval of being exclusive. And so the shock absorber is generative because it's not perfect and it's never fully arrived. And people often say, well, that's a problem, that's a problem, that's a problem. And it used to frustrate me because I used to go, well, you don't look at all the problems in your model, but you're telling me all the problems in mine. What about safe ministry? Before intergenerational ministry became a thing, everyone used to say, that's not going to work because you abuse children in that. You will have children abused in the context where they're allowed to have relationships with adults. You got to keep them away from each other. I even had someone say to me, kids can't become Christians. It was a youth works lecturer. Kids can't become Christians. Teenagers can't become Christians. And so you're wasting your time trying to spread the gospel to teenagers because they're not old enough yet, because the pedagogy teaching from the Anglican Youth Department had a latency, and people were still believing that you can only become a Christian when you're old enough to get confirmation at 14, 15, 16. So you're wasting your time with junior high. They're not able to become a Christian. I said, well, I became a Christian when I was 3. So you're an idiot. But that was me being Kurt Cobain. I apologise for saying that word now, and I apologise to God a long time ago for thinking like that. But the generative nature of it has to be fresh and alive and joyful and refreshing to our spirits, not just successful or efficient. And unfortunately, I still hear from conferences in Australia this drive for efficiency and people trying to theologically convince us that the Bible is interested in efficiency. I've even heard a guy on a podcast giving a little sermon about efficiency in the Bible. I'm like, wow. Now, yeah, the kingdom is about growth, but it's generative. And the great thing about the confidence I had in calling it generative that Tim confirmed with the Ericsson stuff was, thank you, Tim. I'm going to put that in the book to thank you for that, because I was looking for some literature around the generative ability of adults for my literature review. So it wasn't just me saying adults can be generative. So it saves a lot of time to go, well, this is a guy called Corey Siebel, who was a student of Milan Nell, who wrote the book Generative Church, who actually says everything I say in half. It's all about the top down. But he says things like, we need intergenerational friendships. He uses the word friendship in his book. And as I'm searching around, I'm like, I thought we were the only people talking about friendship. But actually there's heaps of people. So in my next chapter, if I get threatened I have to leave the PhD or do Soul Revival, I'd probably resign for a little while, because I really want to finish this, because I've got to finish it, because it's so exciting that people from Dietrich Bonhoeffer in prison with his prison letters, writing to Muller about family is not enough. We need to be able to give people a bigger metaphor, because the Bible does. Jesus talks about being friends as well as family, as well as being a wall, as well as being a body. We're friends with Jesus because we know the Father's business, and the Father's business is to love each other. And so what we could talk about next week is our kids went into the airport and they just loved people and they didn't even know them. And I was so proud of them. And somebody filmed it and said, who are these wackos that are so excited inviting people into Australia at a time where the whole migration debate is so controversial? You've got a bunch of predominantly white kids from the Sutherland Shire jumping up and down and clapping all these people coming through the gates. And it didn't matter what race or background they were or where they were from. They're saying, we're Australians and we're welcoming you to our home. And we're a bit silly too, because we know this isn't socially appropriate. And we're so joyful about being Christian. We want to demonstrate it in public so everyone can see how much we love Jesus. And the girl who made the video, which we could put a link to and talk about it next week, she said, who are these people? And why are they doing it? Is it because, and there's this lovely scene in this video of our kids welcoming all these people to Australia. This Muslim guy was really scared that he's got this girl that he's met lady that he's met on the internet. He hasn't even met her. She's coming through the gate. He's all nervous. He's got a flower for her. And my son Elijah, this little skinny white kid from the Sutherland Shire, goes over to him in compassion, gives him a balloon and says, my balloon is for you. And it says, welcome to Australia. Because Elijah went to the trouble of getting some balloons that actually said what they were excited about. Welcome to Australia. We love you. Anyway, video. The thing I love the most was as the lady comes in, she's all nervous and she kind of even hides a bit because everyone's cheering and clapping.
Yeah, it's a bit on.
And the Muslim guy goes, he puts his hand on his heart and then he goes like that. Thank you. I feel loved. So, you know, it's about the truth and love of Jesus. It's not just about truth. It's not just about love. It's about our message. But I thought that was a wonderful moment to say that those kids were acting like clowns, but they weren't clowns. So when you act in joy and confidence without all the regalia that people go, oh, that's what Christianity is, they go, where's that coming from? And my beautiful friend Ian Sue taught me that when he, as a Chinese man who grew up in Hong Kong, is best friends with me, who's a man who grew up as a young man in Southern Shire, when we want to be doing church together across Sydney, in Ryde and Southern Shire, people say, why do you want to do that all the time to him? And he says, to bring glory to God. And that's why I like the word generative. There you go. There's my little explanation. Sorry I got a little bit teary there. I'm very tired. That's so right. It's probably because I'm tired.
Well, we've actually, while you haven't been here, we've instituted a new segment, which is Tim's takeaway from the episode.
I love that.
Yeah, sorry?
I'm not loving the segment.
You're not loving it.
Puts a lot of pressure on me.
I know, but you're pretty good at it, though. You said we were getting better last week.
Yeah.
What's your takeaway for the episode, Tim?
Oh, goodness. I need to have these planned beforehand.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of things were generated in this episode, I would say.
Yeah.
Why don't you just tell us about your take on that, on the idea of generative?
Oh, I mean, I'm just.
What did you like about it?
Well, I liked that you. I noticed as you were telling me that it was because you had read Kendra Chrissy Dean, who I've not read, talking about youth ministry being this laboratory of generativity. But I had read Corey's work and all the contributors to his book on generative from the trying to be intergenerational, but from the perspective of Erickson's. This is why middle-aged people are described by Erickson as being generative, because you hit this point in your life where you want to bring the best out of the next generation below you. So that was Erickson's idea. And so I think, putting these two together and having the same word, I think was genius. So that's what I really liked about it. My takeaway is that as we engage in intergenerational friendships, to be looking out for both of these spaces. And so the other thing this requires, it requires humility from both sides of the
that's good
generations. So the the older generations need to be have the humility and the patience to put up with the entrepreneurialness and the what was the phrase you used earlier? The idealism of young people. And young people in their idealism can be loud and pushy and and as arrogant, and so the older generation needs to have the patience and the humility as older saints to go, I see what you're doing. Your heart is in this, and I love your energy. And the young people need to have the patience and the humility to be able to say, not like the living end, which is, I don't need no one to tell me what to do, but to be able to say, no, I can learn from you. And so if both generations are doing the right generative work and are being humble with respect to the other and not just saying, oh, okay, boomer, I'm not going to listen to you,
that's right.
Then that's when that happens. So generativity from both sides matched with humility, that's how you get the soul revival approach.
I think it's only possible with what Jesus does for us, isn't it?
That's right. And so, underlying all of this is where I think the theological work is that it is because we are all co-adopted by the same Saviour. And so in the kingdom of God, there is no distinction between males, females, Jews, Greeks, slaves free, and generational difference is a big thing in our culture. I think Paul would rightly say, and there's no distinction between young, old. You don't need this boomer teenage divide. You don't need the generation gap. There are realities there, but in the terms of the kingdom, they don't matter. So let's get on, because we're all co-adopted in Christ, regardless of what generation you're a part of.
Very good way to finish the episode, Tim. Well done. Thank you. Thank you very much, Stu. That was a lot of fun.
Cool.
And a lot of ideas to keep working through on the podcast, I think, because we've got plenty of time to do that. So that's great. Good luck with the rest of your PhD, of course.
Thank you.
And we look forward to it being published eventually. It's going to be fun. We'll send the link when it's ready, which may be a while, but doesn't matter.
May not be.
No,
Yeah,
I like that.
It's cranking on now.
Yeah, awesome. That'd be great. Well, if you have any thoughts about that, if you're listening and watching, thank you, by the way, for listening and watching. Send us an email, joel@shockabsorber.com.au, and we will get into it on the podcast, because we get into stuff on the podcast. I don't know if you noticed. But thank you again, guys. And as always, we're going to finish with a one-way.
One way.
One way.